Hello, PennDOT Community Traffic Safety Partners. Thank you for joining us for another video which is being produced for you by the Children's Hospital of Philadelphia Center for Injury Research and Prevention. In Chapter 6, we'll talk about choosing community programs and interventions, the considerations for choosing another program or intervention from which you might want to adapt, how to prioritize your community's issues and assess their needs, and how to assess other programs for feasibility and success. When determining and considering whether or not you'd like to adapt another program for your own needs, there's a basic plan to follow for assessment and adaptation. The first part of that plan is to use the community needs assessment that you've done and which we've talked about in chapters 2 and 3 to prioritize your community issues. Then you'll assess your audience's needs, review the programs, choose the right program based on your feasibility assessment, prioritize your community issues based on your feasibility and the importance of those issues to your community, and to consider the characteristics of successful programs. Let's talk about each of these a little bit more. So step 1, use your needs assessment to prioritize your community issues. In chapters 2 and 3, we talked in depth about how to create a community needs assessment. In a nutshell, your community needs assessment is going to help you to answer the questions: what is the problem that you might want to tackle in your community? Does your community see it as a problem? Who is affected by the problem? And is there a date to confirm the extent of the problem? Once you've done this, then you can move on to step 2, which is to assess your audience's needs and identify who your target audience is and whether you have multiple audiences. Are there unique characteristics of your audiences, and what might be the best channels for reaching them? In step 3, you want to review other programs. Is there a program which has already been developed and evaluated which might be successful for you in order to be able to make adaptations and modifications? If so, would it address your audience's needs? Is it feasible for you to adapt this program? Are there other programs that you've heard about through colleagues? Well, we hope that you're going to find it very helpful that we have pulled together a teen traffic safety program database for you. In this database, which you'll find with the resource materials, we've provided you with examples of programs across the nations which we think might be very helpful for you to review and adapt for your own use. This database can also help you with step 4, which is choosing the right program based on your feasibility assessment. A feasibility assessment is a structured process that helps you to determine whether or not a program is appropriate for you among several possibilities of different programs and which aspects of those programs might be a good match for you to consider adapting. Let's talk about this more. When you're determining the feasibility of another program to be adapted for your own audience and your own community's needs, there are certain factors which you'll want to consider. What are the resources that are going to be involved? Who is the target audience that this previous program was looking to reach, and how does that match up with my own audience? What were the organizational and community climates like for this program as it was originally implemented, and how do they compare with my own organizational and community climates? How was this program evaluated, and do I have the capacity to evaluate it in this way? And what is needed for future sustainability of this program? A feasibility assessment really starts by asking yourself 3 simple questions. What type of resources are needed? Can my organization support this? Do we have the expertise to do this? And if not, can we find it? Step 5 is to prioritize the community issues that you want to tackle based on your feasibility assessment and how your community needs assessment has let you know whether or not your community believes that issue to be important. The findings from your needs assessment helps to guide those issues that your community thinks you should address in a program. But this table can help you assess the importance of the issue versus your ability to actually impact change. Let's look at this more closely. If you look at the upper left quadrant on this table, you'll see that if your community has identified that an issue is of high importance, and you've identified that you have a high capacity to change, or that it's very feasible for you to tackle that issue, then the answer of whether or not you should take that on in your program is a resounding yes. If it's of low importance to your community, but you know you have high feasibility and high ability to tackle that issue, should you do so? Sure, if it's easy for you to do it. But what if something is of high importance to your community, like the upper right-hand side, but you don't believe that you have the ability to be able to change it, or you don't think it's very feasible for you to take on? Should you try? Yes, if it's really important. But if it's not very important and it's not very feasible, then no, this is not an issue you should tackle. In other words, can you address a key issue and also deliver high impact? Answer that question for yourself. If the answer is yes and is fairly feasible, then address it through a program. But if the answer is no, then you might want to consider tackling a different issue. This is an example of how an issue prioritization table can be used for teens using phones while driving. So for example, in the upper left-hand side, you'll see teens understanding risks associated with calling and texting while driving, and providing programs and resources to educate teens about these risks. Well, this is identified as being more important by the community. In other words, your community has determined that this issue of teens understanding risks associated with calling and texting while driving is important, and that programs should be offered. And you believe that this is something that's very changeable for you and highly feasible for you to do. In that case, go for it. But look at the lower left right-hand quadrant, outlawing the use of phones in cars altogether. This is an example of an issue which the community feels is less important and which you feel is less likely to be able to be changed. In that case, let it go. How can you assess a program for potential success? Well, you can't always know if a program is going to be successful, but there are certain factors that you can look for in other programs to help to give you an idea as to whether or not this might be successful for you. The first thing to look for is whether or not the program components are in line with your needs assessment and what your community has identified as being a priority. The second, determine if the necessary resources are available to implement and sustain the program. Next, identify the barriers and the facilitating factors that will influence whether or not you can really have the program implementation the way that you want it, and how you can overcome those barriers if you have the capacity to do so. Identify the policies that support the program or need to be changed to enable the program to succeed. You might find a program from another state which you think is really great and you want to adapt. But in researching this further, you learn that this other state maybe had a policy where they were able to allow for more face-to-face time with students than Pennsylvania might offer for PennDOT's programs. In that case, your program might not be as successful as this program was in a different state. So consider the policies of other programs and ask yourself whether or not that would translate to the policies that are available to you in your own state. Characteristics of successful programs. We can't always know, again, if a program is going to be successful, but there are some characteristics that have been demonstrated to be best practices which increase the likelihood for program success. These include being comprehensive, flexible, responsive, and persevering, seeing children in the context of families and dealing with families as parts of neighborhoods and communities, having a long-term preventive orientation, a clear mission, and which continue to evolve over time, being managed by competent and committed individuals with clearly identifiable skills, using staff which are trained and supported to provide high-quality responsive services, being collaborative both internally and externally, and generally having a set of relationships and core values that strengthen their sense of shared purpose. So now it's your turn to determine if other interventions are right for you. Start by going to the Teen Traffic Safety Program database. Look at the programs that are on there, and then use this worksheet as you work through them to help you determine if their interventions might be right for you. This worksheet can help you track details like, what is the intervention? Is it simple, practical, compatible to your situation, and provides you a place to write your notes. You can find this worksheet in your resources book. You have just completed Chapter 6 of Section 2, Selecting and Adapting Programs and Interventions. In the next chapter, Chapter 7, we'll talk about the value of evidence-based programs and how looking to evidence-based programs can be a wonderful way to develop and strengthen your own program. Thank you so much for watching.